They called her ugly, so she was left behind while the others were sold. But one man didn't see what was wrong, he saw what was precious, and his kindness would change both their lives forever. The wagon door slammed shut with a metallic thud. Dust rose around it, choking the air, and the muffled sobs of girls aged 10 to 16 echoed as the last of them were carted away. Boots crunched through gravel, spurs clicking like the tick of a merciless clock. When the last set of footsteps faded, the silence that remained was cruel in its finality. There was no more screaming, no more pleading, just her. Delilah sat in the farthest corner of the livestock pen, knees drawn to her chest, her skin caked in dust, hair matted by sweat and tears. Her dress hung in tatters around her legs, and her cheek still bore the fresh welt from being struck that morning. They hadn't even bothered locking the gate after the others were taken. Why would they? No one wanted the one they left behind. She hadn't cried in 2 hours. The auctioneer's assistant, a wiry man with a face like a pickled walnut, had muttered it under his breath when they'd sized her up. Too ugly. Be lucky if a stable takes her. The words had stung more than the slap. She knew she wasn't like the others. The girls sold that day had hair like polished gold, skin like porcelain, and laughter that rang like coins in a pouch. Delilah had neither their beauty nor their light. Her hair was dark and thick, unruly in the heat, and her features plain, at least by their measure. But she had eyes like dusk and a voice she'd long stopped using. She stayed still. Dust circled in tiny whirlwinds across the empty pens, the afternoon sun blinding white. Hunger gnawed. Thirst burned. Her lips cracked every time she moved them, so she stopped trying. If she was going to die here, she'd die quiet. But not before she remembered every face that laughed while she was passed over like bruised fruit. Then came the sound of a wagon approaching. Different this time. No whip cracking, no shouting. Just wheels turning steady and a mule's gentle snort. She didn't look up. People came and went all morning. She was invisible. That was her gift now. But then the wagon stopped, right by the pen. Boots stepped down. She kept her head bowed. The gate creaked open, not slammed, not forced, just pushed. And a man's voice, quiet, patient, the way water sounds when it laps against a shore, broke the heat-drenched stillness. "You been fed?" She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on her knees. She was dirt after all, unwanted. He'd figure that out soon enough and walk away. But the man didn't. He walked over, slow, and crouched just close enough that she could smell the faint, clean scent of horses, leather, and wood smoke. He didn't reach for her, didn't offer a hand, just rested on his heels, waiting. "I brought water," he said, lifting a tin cup. "Cool, fresh from a spring north of town. Got some bread too, if your stomach still knows what to do with it." Her head turned a fraction, not because she believed him, but because the water, real, cold water, was all she could think about. He saw it. He placed the cup just out of reach and stepped back. She hesitated, her fingers twitched. Then she crawled forward slowly, skin scraping against the rough earth, every movement wary like a wild thing trapped too long. She sniffed the cup, then drank. One mouthful, then two. Then she coughed, and tears sprang to her eyes from the pain in her throat, raw and surprised by mercy. The man didn't flinch. "You got a name?" he asked. She set the cup down, didn't speak. But she looked at him, really looked, and saw a face weathered by years, lined around the eyes but kind. He wore no badge, no gun in hand, just a soft tan shirt tucked into worn trousers and a dust-covered hat shading eyes the color of the earth after rain. He didn't press her. "Name's Elias," he said finally. "Elias Coyle. I got a ranch 2 days out. Don't got much company out there since my wife passed. Was looking for a pup or a stray horse, not a girl, but I reckon you might need the land more than they do." She blinked. "You don't have to talk, not yet, but I'm not leaving you here." He stood. "You can ride in the wagon or sit back here, I won't force it." Delilah didn't move. "Either way I'm talking, you where you'll be safe." And then he turned his back and walked away, just like that, like he wasn't testing her, like the choice really was hers. She could have stayed. But for the first time in days, someone had asked if she was hungry. Someone had waited. She stood. Her legs wobbled, but she followed. Elias didn't say a word as she climbed onto the back of his wagon and curled up beside a feed sack. He handed her a strip of dried meat and a blanket, then clucked to the mule and let the road carry them away from the place that had forgotten her name. She slept that night beneath a sky too wide to ever belong to her. But Elias laid a tarp over her when the wind picked up, and when coyotes howled in the distance, he stoked the fire closer to the wagon. She woke once in the dark, heart thudding from a dream she couldn't remember. He was still awake, staring into the fire, silent. She watched him from the shadows and wondered, not if she was safe, but why someone like him had chosen someone like her. By morning, the question still burned. She wouldn't speak for 2 more days. But on that third morning, when he handed her a small wooden comb and gestured to a creek nearby for washing, she whispered just one word. Delilah. He nodded. That's a strong name. And from that moment forward, it started not fast, not loud, but like a seed in dry ground catching its first drop of rain. Delilah didn't smile, not yet. But something inside her lifted its head. The wind that swept through Elias Coyle's land carried the scent of hay, sweat, and honeysuckle. It moved gently across the hills like a lullaby, brushing Delilah's hair as she sat on the porch steps, silent as ever, her hands folded in her lap. 3 days had passed since the wagon rolled to a stop at the ranch house. 3 days of watching from corners, answering questions with nods or blinks, and waking up gasping from dreams she never remembered. Elias hadn't pressed her. He gave her space, a room with a little cot, and a drawer half filled with folded clothes that clearly weren't hers, probably his late wife's, judging by the embroidery. He left food on the table at meal times, gave her chores that didn't require too much talking, and spent most of his daylight hours mending fences or tending to the livestock. But Delilah could feel it, the quiet kindness in the way he never looked at her too long, never flinched at her silence, and never walked faster than she could follow. But what gripped her most were his hands. Big, weathered things, strong, capable, but when they moved brushing down a horse, patting a goat's head, or setting her plate down, there was gentleness in every touch. He hadn't raised those hands at her once, not even when she dropped a jar or spilled the milk. That was new, unfamiliar. It made her nervous. Elias came up the porch steps that evening carrying 2 bowls of stew. He paused, then offered her one. She didn't take it immediately. Her eyes flicked up to him, uncertain. I made extra, he said, and sat beside her, leaving the bowl between them. Delilah reached for it slowly. The spoon trembled slightly in her hand. She stared into the brown mixture of beans and meat and finally asked in a whisper, "Why?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "Why did I bring you?" She nodded. Elias leaned back against the porch rail and let the question hang in the warm dusk. "Because you were alone," he said, "and it felt wrong." Delilah frowned. "That simple?" she asked. Elias looked at her then, not startled, not smug, just honest. "No," he said, "nothing's ever simple, but I've seen too many young ones broken before they ever had a chance. That place you were in, I wouldn't let them break another if I could help it." She looked back at the bowl. "No one else wanted me. I ain't everyone else." That made her breath catch. She blinked fast and looked away before her eyes could spill anything dangerous. They ate in silence after that. The days passed. She began brushing the horses in the morning, helping collect eggs, folding laundry that wasn't hers but was soft and clean and hers to touch. She didn't talk much, but she started humming sometimes when she thought she was alone. And Elias, whether he heard her or not, never interrupted. She asked about his wife once, a week into staying. "Was she pretty?" Delilah asked, staring at the sewing box in the parlor. Elias was fixing the hinge on a cabinet and paused. Her name was Miriam, he said after a moment, and yes, to me she was. Was she like them? Delilah asked. The girls who got taken. Elias set his tool down. No, he said. She wasn't loud or painted up. She had dirt under her nails and never quite learned how to bake bread without burning it. But she saw things that others missed. That's what made her beautiful. Delilah looked at her hands. Elias watched her a moment longer. You remind me of her, he said quietly. Delilah shook her head, the words too much, too quick. I'm not. You're not her, Elias agreed gently, but you see things too. It was the first time she looked directly at him and didn't flinch. She started calling him Mr. Coyle after that, and he let her. But the walls weren't gone, not yet. One morning, she woke to find Elias hadn't returned from the barn. The sky was barely lit, mist hung low over the fields. Delilah slipped out in her bare feet and walked toward the paddock. A horse whinnied low, and then she heard it, a cough, ragged, coming from the far stall. She ran. Elias was seated on a stool, sweat pouring down his neck. His hand clutched his side. Mr. Coyle. He winced and looked up. Just a little spell, sweetheart. But his face was pale. She rushed to his side and knelt. Did something hit you? No, he rasped. Just old ribs flare up now and then. Delilah grabbed a bucket, filled it, soaked a cloth, and pressed it to his forehead. Her hands trembled. She didn't care. You're not dying, are you? His eyes twinkled, even through the pain. Not today. They sat like that for a while, her hand steady against his temple, his breathing slow and shallow. That night she made him tea, burned the bread, and still he smiled. You're learning, he said. She shook her head, but her lips curled faintly. By the end of the month, she'd stopped sleeping with her boots on. Elias brought back a dress for her from town one afternoon, soft cotton, sky blue, simple and stitched well. Delilah stared at it like it was made of thorns. It's just a dress, he said gently, not a chain. She didn't answer. He left it on the bed. The next Sunday she wore it. He didn't comment, just tipped his hat as though she'd always worn blue. And slowly, Delilah started to believe she wasn't a burden. Not a leftover. Not the ugliest one. She wasn't sure how it happened, the feeling, but one evening she found herself watching him rake hay under the sunset and her chest ached. Not with fear, not with shame, but something else, something quiet and kind. A longing not for what she didn't have, but for what she didn't deserve. Elias didn't know. He still called her Delilah and let her be. But one night the dream came back. She woke gasping. Darkness pressing against the walls, shouting in her ears, hands grabbing. Delilah stumbled out of bed, shaking. She didn't think. She just ran to the door across the hall and knocked. Mr. Coyle. A beat. Then footsteps. The door opened. His hair was mussed, shirt undone at the collar. He blinked. Delilah. She breathed, gripping the doorframe. I'm sorry. He stepped back, letting her in without question. What happened? Just a dream, a bad one. I didn't want to be alone. Elias nodded once and pulled a quilt from the foot of the bed, setting it by the rocking chair. You can sit, he said. I'll keep the lamp on. She hesitated, then sat. They didn't speak. The oil lamp flickered between them. And as the night passed, Delilah curled beneath the quilt and watched him sleep from the chair, steady, quiet, safe. She didn't know it yet. But something had shifted. In her. In him. The storm that was coming, neither of them could see. But when it hit, it would shake everything. The storm arrived without rain. It didn't roll in from the west like most things did in this land. It came quietly, on a horse. Delilah was feeding the chickens when she heard the hoofbeats. She stood up, wiping her hands on her apron, and squinted toward the edge of the road. Elias was already by the gate, one hand on the latch, the other resting low on his hip where his revolver hadn't hung in years. His eyes didn't move, just followed the rider as he approached, slow, unhurried, like a man too sure of his purpose. The stranger wore a gray duster and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. His beard was short, dark, and coarse, and though he looked young, something in the way he sat his saddle made it clear this man had seen too much. He stopped 10 paces from the gate. "You Elias Coyle?" he asked. "I am," Elias replied evenly. The man tipped his hat back. "My name's Dillard Wren. I'm looking for a girl." Delilah froze. Elias' voice didn't change. "There's no girl here for you." Dillard smirked. "See, I think there is, about 15. Brown hair, eyes like they're carrying a whole war behind 'em. Was in the auction house south of Whitaker's Bend, but she wasn't sold. Heard someone took her without payment. That true?" Elias straightened. "I don't deal in human flesh," he said low. Dillard's eyes narrowed. "Well, I do, and she was promised to a man who don't take kindly to thieves." "She's not property," Elias said. "She was," Dillard snapped. "You think because you pulled her out the back she ain't marked no more. That's not how this works." "I don't give a spit how it works in the places you crawl through," Elias said. "You come onto my land again with talk like that, I'll bury your words along with your horse." Silence followed, the kind that made the air brittle. Dillard's face didn't change, but his jaw tensed. "I'll be back," he said. "With others she's been paid for." Elias leaned forward over the fence, eyes level. "Then you can tell whoever sent you that their coin bought nothing but air and ash. Because that girl," he pointed back toward the house, "is under my roof now, and if they come, they best bring their coffins." Dillard didn't respond. He simply turned his horse and rode off without another word. Elias didn't move for a full minute after the dust settled. Delilah had backed behind the chicken coop. She hadn't meant to listen, but she had. When she stepped out, her face was pale. "Who was that?" she asked. Elias met her gaze, trouble. Delilah didn't speak. But that night, she didn't wait for the dream to wake her. She knocked on his door before the oil lamp was even out. "I'm scared," she whispered. Elias opened the door and stepped aside without hesitation. "You're safe," he said. "As long as I'm breathing, you're safe." She sat in the chair again, arms folded tight, staring into the flame. "You shouldn't have said all that," she said. "He'll come back." "I know. And he might bring others." "I know." She looked up. "Why?" Elias poured her a cup of tea and set it in her hands before answering. "I've lived alone for a long time. I thought it was enough. But I don't think God made us to live for ourselves. I don't know why he let you find your way here, Delilah, but I know he didn't put you in my barn just to send you back into darkness." She gripped the cup tighter. Her eyes shimmered. "I'm not worth fighting for." Elias knelt in front of her. "You're wrong," he said. "You were worth it the second you were born." She looked away. But something cracked in her chest. That night, for the first time, she fell asleep in the chair. And when morning came, Elias didn't wake her. He just brought a blanket and placed it over her shoulders. But the peace didn't last. 2 days later, smoke rose in the east. Elias saw it first while checking the fence line. He narrowed his eyes and climbed the ridge. A homestead, the Welker place, was burning. By the time he got there, the barn was cinders. The house had been looted. No sign of the couple who lived there, just hoofprints and discarded crates. Elias found blood on the doorstep. A message was carved into the barn door, blackened and cruel. "She's ours." Elias rode home fast. Delilah was kneeling in the garden, planting onions. When he galloped in, she rose, startled. "We have to get you inside," he said. "What happened?" "Someone sent a message. They're coming." Delilah shook her head. "We can't fight them all." "I'm not going to run." "You should," she said. "I'm not worth your blood." Elias grabbed her shoulders, not hard but firm. His eyes burned with something deeper than anger. "You don't decide that," he said. "You don't get to say whether you're worth it or not. I already did." She swallowed hard. "I'm scared," she whispered again. "So am I," Elias replied. "But I'd rather be afraid with you here than safe in a world that let men like that win." That night Elias took down the old rifle from above the hearth. He oiled it slow, methodical. Delilah sat on the couch, watching. "Do you know how to use one of those?" she asked. Elias chuckled softly. "I used to be sheriff," he said, "before I settled this land." She blinked. "You never told me." "I buried that part of me when Miriam died. Thought I was done with fighting." He glanced out the window. "Looks like the fight found me anyway." The next 2 days passed in a strange stillness. Delilah helped prepare, storing water, gathering food, tending the horses. Elias reinforced the windows and mounted lanterns on the roof. Every night they sat together by the fire, quiet, as if afraid to disturb the calm that might be the last they knew. Then came the morning. A cloud of dust on the horizon. Elias climbed the roof with his spyglass. 7 riders. He climbed down. "They're coming." Delilah stood in the doorway. "Do I hide?" He looked at her, this girl who had once been discarded, forgotten, unloved. "Not anymore." They took their positions, Elias at the window, Delilah by the cellar door with a pistol she could barely hold steady. The sun climbed high. Hoofbeats drew near. Then silence. Then voices. "Elias Coyle," Dillard called out. "We don't want to kill a man of your reputation, but the girl belongs to someone with deep pockets. Step aside." Elias opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. "You want her, you'll have to cross me first." "You ain't bulletproof," Dillard warned. "No," Elias agreed, "but I'm willing." Dillard's face darkened. He raised his hand. And then a sound split the silence. Hoofbeats. From behind. From the woods. Dozens. Then hundreds. Elias turned. From the North Ridge, men on horseback emerged, not in uniform, not lawmen, but ranchers, neighbors, friends. Old men with worn hats and shotguns. Young boys barely grown. Even a few women on horseback, all of them riding with purpose. At the head of them was Pastor Merrow, rifle in hand. He tipped his hat. "You're not alone, Elias." Dillard looked back. "What is this?" he snarled. "This," Elias said, stepping off the porch, "is what happens when evil forgets that decency ain't dead." Dillard pulled his pistol. Elias didn't flinch. Neither did the dozens of barrels, now trained on Dillard's men from every angle. "You'll lose," Elias said. "Even if you shoot me, you'll lose." Dillard looked at the odds. Spat. Turned his horse. "We'll be back," he growled. "No," Elias said, "you won't." And this time they didn't. Delilah came out onto the porch as the dust settled. The townsfolk gathered. Some patted Elias on the back, others looked at her kindly. No one asked questions. When they left, Elias stood in the doorway. Delilah walked up beside him. "You said I'm not alone anymore," she whispered. "You're not." She hesitated. And then, as the sun dipped low and the wind stirred the grass around them, she leaned against his side, pressed her head to his arm, and whispered, "Thank you, Papa." Elias froze. His breath caught. Then he reached down, wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and held her close. Not like a savior. but like a father, like she was his. The days after the standoff passed in a hush, like the land itself was holding its breath. The air felt different, safer maybe, not because danger had vanished, it never truly did, but because something in Delilah had begun to shift. It was in the way she stood straighter when she fed the chickens, how her hands no longer trembled when she reached for Elia's tea kettle. It was the way her eyes, which had once darted like a deer, before the gunshot, began to linger, on the stars, on the wind moving through the trees, on him. But healing, even in the safety of love, wasn't quiet. It was messy and loud. And it came that night, like a tide breaking inside her chest. Delilah had gone to bed early. The ranch had been peaceful all day. Elias had taken her into town for the first time in weeks. Folks nodded to her like she belonged. She even smiled once when Mrs. Kintry gave her a dress, blue, with a flower pinched at the waist. It was nothing fancy, but it had made her blink fast and hold it like something sacred. That night, Elias was reading when he heard her scream. He dropped the book and bolted down the hall. Delilah sat upright in bed, eyes wide, soaked in sweat. He didn't say a word. He just knelt beside the bed, waited for her breathing to slow. "It was him again," she whispered, "the man who bought me." Elias' jaw locked. He was laughing, and her voice cracked, I couldn't move. "It was just a dream," he said gently. "It was not to me." Elias looked at her, so small in that bed, swallowed by blankets she'd only recently begun to call her own. "I wish I could take it from you," he said, "all of it, but I can't." She stared down at her hands. "I feels filthy, even now, like I can't get it off me." "Listen to me," he said, his voice thick. "What they did, what they tried to do, that's not who you are, that's who they are. And I don't know much, but I know this, God don't make trash, and he didn't make you to live in the shadow of what others did." She looked up at him, eyes wide, searching. "Then what am I?" He swallowed hard. "You're my daughter." She covered her mouth with both hands. "I didn't mean to say it," she said. "That day on the porch I called you Papa, it just slipped." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was the best word I've ever heard." She cried then, not the small, polite kind of crying, but deep, shaking sobs that cracked her ribs open and let everything out. Elias sat beside her, one arm around her shoulder, the other hand on her back. "I want to believe it," she wept, "that I'm yours, that I'm worth it." "Then believe it," he said, "because you are." That night she didn't go back to sleep alone. Elias brought a chair beside her bed, leaned back and stayed until dawn, dozing in and out. And when morning came, she was already sitting up, hands folded in her lap. "Can I go with you today?" she asked, "wherever you're going." Elias smiled, bleary-eyed. "Of course." They rode together to the upper pasture. She helped him mend fence posts, gathered eggs from the wild hens who'd escaped the coop, even laughed once when Elias slipped into the creek trying to free a calf from the mud. Her laugh stopped him cold. It wasn't nervous or polite. It was real. And it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. In town, word had spread. Not about the standoff. That part had stayed quiet, as if everyone knew it was better left unspoken. But about her. That she was under Elias' roof. That he called her daughter. Some folks asked questions, others raised eyebrows, but most nodded kindly and let it be. Still, not everyone was content with peace. Dillard Wren had vanished after the failed confrontation. Some believed he'd left the territory. Others thought he'd regrouped, nursing his wounds somewhere dark. Elias hoped the former, but he didn't stop watching the ridgelines. And he never let Delilah walk alone to the barn. One evening, weeks after that awful night, a package arrived at the general store. No name, just a plain brown box wrapped in twine. The shopkeep, an old friend of Elias named Hiram, handed it over with a strange look. "This came for you," he said. "Dropped by a rider passing through, didn't stay." Elias took it home. He didn't open it right away. He waited until Delilah had gone to bed. Inside the box was a single item, a doll. Old, torn, stuffed with straw. Its face had been carved with a knife, 2 eyes, stitched mouth, a long gash across its cheek. And tucked inside the doll's dress, a note. 4 words. "She's still not yours." Elias stared at the note for a long time. Then he walked to the hearth, tossed the doll into the fire, and watched it burn. Delilah found him there, an hour later. "You okay?" she asked, seeing his shoulders tight. He nodded. But she looked past him and saw the smoldering heap. "What was that?" "Nothing you need to worry about." Her voice dropped. "He's coming back, isn't he?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. But this time, Delilah didn't shake. She just walked forward and took his hand. "Then let him come," she said. The next day she asked for a rifle. Elias blinked. "I want to learn," she said. "I don't want to be helpless anymore." He stared at her, searching for signs of fear, but all he saw was resolve. "You sure?" "Yes." So he taught her. Every morning they rode out to the far field. He showed her how to load, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger slow. She was a quick learner. At first her hands trembled, but after a week she could hit the center of a can from 30 paces. One afternoon, as she was cleaning the rifle, she looked up. "Do you think God still loves me?" Elias sat down beside her. "I don't think he ever stopped. Even after everything. Especially after everything." She was quiet for a long time. "I want to believe that." He smiled. "Then say it out loud." She hesitated. Then whispered, "God loves me." He cupped his hand to his ear. "What was that?" She laughed softly. "God loves me." Louder. "God loves me." She was smiling now. And Elias nodded. "That's right, and so do I." She looked down. "I think I love you too." He put an arm around her shoulder, held her close. "Then we're right where we're meant to be." But peace wasn't meant to last. That night, just before moonrise, Elias heard something outside. Footsteps. He grabbed his rifle and crept to the door. Delilah, now sleeping in the small room across the hall, heard it too and padded silently after him. At the porch, Elias paused, then yanked the door open. A man stood there, bleeding from a wound in his side, panting. "Help," he gasped. "Please, they took her." "Who?" Elias asked, grabbing his arm. "My sister," the man wheezed. "They're taking girls again. South Bend, same man, Dillard. I tried to stop them. He's back." Elias looked over his shoulder. Delilah was there. Eyes wide, jaw clenched. "Then we stop him," she said. Elias didn't argue. He just loaded his rifle. They rode at dawn. They rode out before the light had fully broken. The sky was still a deep, bruised blue, and the world felt as if it hadn't decided yet whether to wake or fall back into darkness. Elias led, rifle strapped across his back, and Delilah rode just behind him, her fingers gripping the reins so tightly her knuckles blanched. The injured man, Warren, as he'd managed to croak out, rode double on Elias' spare horse, groaning with every jolt. Delilah didn't ask questions, not about what lay ahead, not about the danger, not even about what Dillard Wren might do if he recognized her. She only had one thought, and it burned in her chest like fire. Someone out there was about to live what she had barely escaped. And she wasn't going to let it happen. The trail was rough, winding along the river bend and veering through thickets where the branches clawed at them like the memories that sometimes still try to pull her under. Elias kept checking the horizon, his jaw set tight. Delilah watched him, noting how the lines beside his eyes seemed deeper today, how his silence wasn't just caution, it was grief too. Not for himself, but for every child lost before they could be found. They reached South Bend by mid-morning. It wasn't a town, just a sprawl of battered shacks where miners used to work, back when there was gold in the hills. Now it was mostly abandoned, the kind of place men with foul hearts could claim without question. There were 3 horses tied near the biggest shack. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, and beside the front step, a rifle leaned against the wall like a warning. Warren pointed with a shaking hand. "That's the one." Elias dismounted. Delilah did too, without hesitation. "I want to go with you," she said. "No," Elias replied instantly. "I have to." "You don't, not this way." Her eyes were steel. "You said I wasn't helpless anymore." He turned to her, jaw clenched. "If he sees you, Delilah, if he remembers who you are, he'll use it." "Let him try," she said. "I won't flinch this time." Before Elias could argue again, the door creaked open, and out stepped Dillard Wren. He looked older, rougher, one arm bandaged in stained cloth, but the eyes were the same, cold, dead inside. He squinted into the light, then froze. Recognition hit him like a bullet. "Well," he drawled, "ain't this a surprise?" Elias stepped forward, hand near his sidearm. "Let the girl go, Dillard." Dillard chuckled. "You think I'd have her where you can see her?" "I don't need to see her," Elias said. "I just need to know she's still breathing." Dillard shrugged. "She's alive for now." Delilah stepped forward before Elias could stop her. "You never broke me," she said, "and you won't break her." Dillard's mouth curled. "Well now, that voice, I remember you." He tilted his head. "The ugly one, thought you died in some ditch like the rest of them." "I lived," she said, "long enough to see you run." Elias stepped between them, hand tight on his weapon. "You've got 10 seconds to hand her over, then we come in." Dillard's smile faded. "You're bluffing." Elias said nothing. Inside the shack, a girl screamed. Delilah bolted forward. "Delilah," Elias called out, but it was too late. She was already inside. The room stank of whiskey and sweat. A young girl, couldn't be more than 12, was tied to a post in the corner, cheeks wet with tears. Delilah ran to her, cutting the rope with the blade she carried at her belt. The girl sobbed and clung to her, eyes wide with shock. Then a sound. Footsteps behind her. She turned in time to see Dillard lunge. Delilah raised the blade. He caught her wrist and slammed her backward into the wall. She hit hard, head spinning. The girl screamed again, ducking behind a crate. Dillard loomed over Delilah, panting. "I should have finished you when I had the chance," he snarled. "And I should have shot you when I first saw your face," came Elias' voice, low and lethal. Dillard turned. Too slow. The butt of Elias' rifle cracked into his jaw. He crumpled to the floor, blood pooling from his mouth. Outside, a second man appeared from the woods, gun drawn, running toward the shack. Delilah saw him through the window. She grabbed the rifle from where Dillard had dropped it and aimed. She didn't breathe. She didn't think. She just squeezed. The bullet caught the man in the shoulder. He stumbled back, dropped his weapon, and fled into the brush. Elias stared at her. "You shot him." She nodded, still shaking. "He would have killed you." Elias looked at the trembling girl beside her, then at Dillard groaning on the floor. "You all right?" he asked. Delilah nodded again, then looked at the girl. "She's scared," she whispered, "same way I was." Elias knelt. "We're gonna take you home, all right." The girl didn't speak. She just clung to Delilah's waist. Elias tied Dillard's hands with rope, tight enough to cut circulation. "You going to kill me?" Dillard spat. No, Elias said, killing you'd be too kind. He dragged him outside, threw him over his saddle. They returned to the ranch by nightfall. The girl's name was Ellie. She'd been taken 3 days ago from her father's farm in Oak Hollow. They sent a rider to fetch her kin. She barely spoke on the ride back, but she wouldn't let go of Delilah's hand. Delilah tucked her into her own bed and slept in a chair beside her, just like Elias had once done for her. The sheriff came that night to collect Dillard. Said he'd hang by the week's end. No trial, no mercy. Too many girls, too many graves. Delilah stood on the porch and watched them ride off with him, the lanterns bobbing in the dark like stars. Elias joined her. You did good, he said. I couldn't let it happen again. You didn't. She looked up at him, brow furrowed. Do you think it's over? Elias sighed. For that man, yes, but the hurt, it never leaves all the way, it just softens. I don't want to live in fear anymore. You won't. They stood there in silence. Then she asked, can we keep riding out together, like before? As long as I've got a horse, I'll ride beside you. She smiled faintly. 2 days later, Ellie's father arrived. Big man, quiet voice, eyes rimmed red. When he saw his daughter, he dropped to his knees and held her like something fragile. He thanked Delilah a dozen times, hugged Elias like a brother. Before they rode off, Ellie leaned down and kissed Delilah's cheek. You're my hero, she whispered. Delilah couldn't answer. She just nodded, tears brimming. When they were gone, Elias turned to her. You saved her. She shook her head. No, she whispered. You saved me, and I just passed it on. Elias put a hand on her shoulder. You think you're the same girl who arrived here shaking, hiding behind her hair. I feel different, she said. You are. That night, as Elias sat on the porch, reading the good book, Delilah stepped outside in her bare feet, hair loose over her shoulders. She sat beside him, took the book from his hands. Can you show me where it says he still loves me? Elias smiled, flipped through the worn pages. Then he pointed. Delilah read aloud, Fear not, for I have redeemed thee, I have called thee by thy name, thou art mine. Her voice cracked. Elias waited. Then she whispered, I want to be baptized. Elias looked at her. You sure? Yes. Then let's ride to the preacher tomorrow. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. And Papa, she said. He looked up. Thank you. For what? For making me feel loved, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Elias closed the book. I didn't just want to, sweetheart. I was made to. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. And in that quiet with the stars above and the earth below, nothing else mattered. Not the past, not the wounds, not the scars. Only that they had found each other in a world that had tried to break them both. The preacher stood ankle-deep in the slow river, the water still and brown beneath the June sun. Wild reeds swayed along the edges, cicadas hummed from the tree line, and the sky held not a single cloud. Delilah stepped down the bank barefoot, her white dress simple, clinging to her frame as the fabric caught a light breeze. Elias stood on the bank with his hands clasped and his hat off, reverent, watchful. When Delilah met the preacher's eyes, she didn't tremble. She didn't look down at her feet or cross her arms to shrink herself small. She only breathed, one deep breath, and walked into the water like a woman choosing to drown everything that had once held her down. The river was cold, not cruel, just honest. It held no memory of her past. It only waited. The preacher raised one hand, his voice steady. Delilah, do you confess your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ as your Redeemer? I do, she said, louder than she expected. Do you believe he has washed away your sins and made you new? I do. Then upon your profession of faith, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." She closed her eyes. The preacher lowered her back into the water. The world disappeared. And when she rose, gasping in air and sunlight, her whole chest opened. Not from cold, not from pain, but from something she hadn't known she was still capable of. Hope. Elias helped her back onto the bank, where he wrapped her in a wool blanket and placed a careful hand on her shoulder. He said nothing at first, letting her sit with what she felt. But then he leaned in close and whispered, "I'm proud of you, little bird." She smiled. "I finally believe I was worth saving." The ride home was quiet, not sad, just peaceful. Birds called overhead. The scent of warm pine hung on the wind, and Delilah rode with her chin lifted, watching the hills roll by, her arms still damp beneath the blanket but her spirit dry and light as kindling. That night Elias made stew and they ate on the porch. Delilah had left her hair unbraided since the river, and it caught the light like a halo. She told him about the dream she'd had once of flying, of looking down on the world from above, where nothing could touch her. Elias told her about the first time he ever delivered a foal alone, and how the mare had nearly trampled him in her panic. They laughed. Not politely, not cautiously, but like two people who had been through hell and come back with lungs still working. That should have been the end. But darkness never forgets its prey. It only waits. 2 weeks later, a telegram arrived from Oak Hollow. 2 more girls missing, taken near Briar Gulch. Suspect spotted matching Dillard's cousin, Raven Wren, traveling south with cart and mules, says he's a preacher. Last seen wearing black hat with a red sash. Elias read it twice. Then again. Delilah stood behind him, clutching a folded sheet she'd been using to line the kitchen shelf. Her hand stilled when she heard the name. Another Wren. Elias nodded slowly. Cousin, worse maybe. Dillard did the dirty work. Raven recruited. Recruit. For brothels, he said flatly. For buyers, for worse. Delilah looked down. The past wasn't dead. It just changed its face. Where's Briar Gulch? She asked. 3 days south. We're going. Elias turned to face her. This ain't like before. This ain't just rescuing one girl. If he's on the move, he could have 5, 10. All the more reason. He stared at her a long moment. You sure? Delilah met his gaze with steel in her voice. I won't stay home while he ruins more of us. Elias set down the telegram. Then we ride at first light. They packed light. Elias carried his Winchester and 2 revolvers. Delilah took her blade and a rifle Elias had taught her to clean and load until her hands worked without thought. She tucked a photo of Ruth in her pocket, just a sketch she'd drawn herself, trying to remember her sister's face. Soft mouth, large eyes, braid down the left shoulder. I'll bring her with me, she murmured. Elias nodded, watching her saddle up with pride and worry tangled tight inside him. They rode hard the first day, stopping only once to rest the horses and eat cold beans by a crick. Elias kept scanning the horizon. Delilah kept dreaming of voices in the dark, girls whispering behind closed doors, their fear almost too loud to ignore. By the second night, they reached the edges of Briar Gulch. It wasn't a town. Just a string of tents and wagons near a mining pit, where men drank too much and women vanished too easily. They dismounted behind a blacksmith stall and asked around. Preacher, one man said, spitting tobacco. Saw one just yesternight. Black hat, red sash, you know. Real strange fellow. Said he was talking girls to an orphanage down near Yuma. Delilah's throat closed. Did anyone go with him? The man rubbed his jaw. Couple kids, sisters I think, little things, scared out of their minds. He said he had papers. Where did he go? South, always south. They rode through the night. No stars. No moon. Just the wind and the steady rhythm of hooves, pounding a trail of urgency into the dirt. By dawn, they found a camp. Cart tracks, mule prints, a fire still smoking. Elias motioned for quiet. Delilah slid from her saddle and crept forward with him, hearts pounding in sync. They saw the cart first, canvas pulled over a wooden frame tied tight at the corners. Two mules still hitched, chewing lazily. A kettle on a hook swayed gently above coals. Then a man stepped out from behind a tree, wiping his hands. Black hat. Red sash. He didn't see them. Delilah didn't hesitate. She raised her rifle. Don't move. The man froze, turned slowly, smiled. Well, now look what crawled out the woods, you law. No, she said, I'm worse. Elias came beside her. Where are the girls? The man licked his lips. What girls? Delilah stepped forward, rage boiling behind her eyes. I know what you are. Do you? You hunt girls who can't fight back. You lie with scripture on your tongue. You sell what God created. The smile vanished. I do the Lord's work, Raven said. You do the devil's, Elias growled. Raven lunged. He was fast. But Delilah was faster. She shot him through the thigh. He screamed, dropped to the ground, clutching his leg. Elias tackled him, knocking his gun away, then bound his hands with rope. Delilah rushed to the cart. She sliced the canvas. Inside, two girls sat huddled, tied at the wrists. One couldn't have been more than 6, the other maybe 9, eyes wide, silent. Delilah cut their ropes gently. It's all right, she whispered. You're safe now. The older one trembled. He said you'd kill us. He lied, Delilah said, touching her cheek. We came to save you. Elias tossed Raven into the back of the cart, hogtied and cursing, then led the girls to his horse. Delilah gathered blankets, bread, and water. She fed them slowly, checking their eyes, their arms, their backs for bruises. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed calm. The girls didn't speak much, but they wouldn't let go of her skirt. They rode back slower. This time, there was no fear of being too late. Just the burden of what had almost happened. They reached the ranch by the 4th day. And everything changed. The girls, Myra and Sally, took to the ranch like seeds to good soil. Myra cried for 3 nights straight. Sally wouldn't speak above a whisper. But then Delilah showed them the barn loft, the feather mattresses, the wild colts, the jar of peppermints Elias kept for visitors. And the girls began to laugh. Just little sounds at first. But Elias noticed the change. And he said nothing, only kept building new shelves, new bunks, new places for them to feel like this was theirs. That Sunday, 5 girls sat beside Delilah on the church pew. All rescued, all living, all hers in some unspoken way. Elias sang louder than he ever had. And when the preacher said, "There's always room at the Lord's table," Myra raised her hand and said, "Can I sit next to Miss Delilah?" The whole church smiled. Delilah wept. And Elias wept beside her. Because what had been torn from ashes was now alive and whole. But the world still held wolves. And one of them was coming. From the edge of the prairie. With a letter in hand. And a face Delilah never thought she'd see again. The letter was sealed with wax the color of dried blood. The writer who delivered it wore a government-issued coat, but rode like a man who'd seen war and didn't flinch at rattlesnakes. He handed the envelope to Elias just after sunset, while the girls were in the barn helping Delilah brush down the colts. Elias read it under the porch light, the lines on his face deepening with each sentence. He didn't say a word for a long while. When Delilah walked up the steps, hair damp from sweat and wind, she knew by the look on his face it wasn't good news. Who's it from? She asked. Elias didn't speak, just handed it to her. She read slowly. The words felt like ash on her tongue. To Elias Ward and Delilah Wren. This letter concerns a man named Clifton Wren, formerly of Oak Hollow, previously residing in Rust Ridge. He has escaped federal custody while awaiting trial for the transport and sale of minors across state lines. He was last seen heading west toward Dry Creek Valley. He is armed, dangerous, highly manipulative. Our agents believe he may attempt to contact family, including any known relatives from his brother's household. You are advised to exercise extreme caution. If spotted, do not engage. Notify U.S. Marshals immediately. Respectfully, Marshal R.G. Whitmore. Delilah let the letter fall from her fingers. Clifton. Uncle Clifton. He wasn't just dangerous. He wasn't just cruel. He was the first. The one who started it all. Not with fists, but with whispers. With lies. With 1,000 small manipulations that taught Delilah and Ruth and the others that pain was normal. That submission was survival. He was the one who told her she was too ugly to be wanted, too strange to be loved, too plain to belong. He was the one who sold Ruth. And now he was coming. Elias picked up the letter and folded it with steady fingers. We'll send word to the marshals, get the girls into town, maybe stay with Pastor Emmett for a few nights. Delilah's voice came quieter than she meant. He won't come for them. Elias turned. He'll come for me. Then we'll be ready. Delilah didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed in silence, brushing the tangles from Myra's curls while the child slept. Across the room, Sally mumbled in her dreams, fingers twitching near her cheek. Delilah remembered those dreams. She still had them. The ones where you're back in the cellar. Back in the dark. Back in the silence that means nobody's coming. The next morning she helped Elias pack the girls into the wagon. Myra cried. Sally clung to her leg. Even the older girls, tougher ones like Louise and June, looked afraid. We'll be back soon, Delilah promised, kissing their cheeks one by one. You're brave, you're safe. She waved until they were a speck in the distance, then turned and looked out at the field. The wind was wrong. Too still. Like the earth itself was waiting. By nightfall, Elias had checked every corner of the barn, every ridge above the property, and every loose nail on the door. He set trip lines by the gate, loaded the rifles, and put one pistol in the floorboard beneath their bed. Delilah cooked beans, though neither of them ate much. The kitchen felt hollow without the girls, laughter echoing through it. They sat on the porch until the moon rose. That's when they heard it. A single knock. Not on the door, but on the barn. 3 slow knocks. Like someone asking for entry. Elias was on his feet in a breath. Delilah grabbed the rifle and followed him into the night, boots silent on the grass. They reached the barn. No one. The door swung open. Inside, a single scrap of paper sat on the hay. Delilah picked it up. Her hands trembled. You always were the least pretty, ugly little thing, with her head full of nonsense. You should have thanked me for keeping you hidden. See? Elias took the note from her, lips pressed thin. He's close, she whispered. He wants me afraid. Then let him see what happens when he tries again. They stayed up that night, every candle lit, every door bolted. Delilah paced the floor while Elias watched from the window, his rifle across his lap. But Clifton didn't come. Not that night. The next day, Elias rode into town to speak with the marshal. He told Delilah to stay inside, to lock the door and shoot anything that moved. But the moment his horse disappeared down the trail, she felt it. The shift. Like something unseen had stepped into the room with her. She turned slowly, and there he was, sitting at the kitchen table like he belonged there. Same greased hair, same crooked smile, same gray in his beard she remembered from the last time he cornered Ruth in the barn. "Hello, little Dell." She didn't move. The wedding took place the next spring, beneath a canopy of wild dogwoods in full bloom. Delilah wore ivory, not white, not pure, but honest. A dress stitched by the hands of the girls she'd raised, patched with tiny pieces of old memory. A ribbon from Myra's bonnet, lace from Ruth's forgotten shawl, buttons June had polished herself with soap and patience. They gathered early that morning, the sky blushing with sun. Sally and Myra stood barefoot on the path, scattering flower petals from their small hands, their grins too wide for their faces. Louise, strong and sunburned, held the hem of Delilah's train like a soldier escorting a queen. Elias waited beneath the oak, his hat in one hand, a ring in the other, and the kind of look on his face that only men who have lost something and found it again can wear. When he saw her, he didn't blink. He barely breathed. It wasn't because she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, though she was. It was because she was his. Finally, entirely. By choice, not force, not law, not luck, but love. Pastor Emmett read from the scriptures, hands trembling, voice cracking over the words about cords not easily broken and love that bears all things. When it came time to speak, Elias kept it simple. "I don't have much to give you but this ranch and my heart. Both are yours now forever." Delilah's voice wavered. "I used to think God forgot me. Then you showed up, and I realized he was just waiting until the right man could see what was left in me." They kissed. The girls clapped, Myra shouted, Sally sobbed into Louise's skirt. And the dogwoods whispered in the breeze like the prayers of women long gone, who never had the chance to stand where Delilah stood now, strong, wanted, chosen. That summer the ranch became more than just a safe haven. It became a sanctuary, not just for the 6 girls who had slept under its rafters during the hard years, but for others too. Word spread that if a child walked too far and had no one to run to, the Wrenward Ranch would take them in. That if a girl showed up bruised and didn't want to talk, Delilah would put a brush in her hand and let her comb the horses until her voice came back. That if a boy arrived bitter and angry from some railroad camp up north, Elias would teach him to mend fences instead of fists. The ranch grew, not in land but in love. One Sunday morning, a woman knocked at their door with a toddler on her hip and shame in her eyes. She had nothing but her name, Raven. Delilah recognized it instantly and pulled her into a hug so fierce it made them both cry. "Ruth told me about you," Delilah whispered. Raven clung to her. "I thought she died." "She did, but not before making sure girls like us could live." Raven stayed. The toddler grew. The bunkhouse had to be expanded. One by one, others came too, some children of the original girls who stayed close, others complete strangers. But the same questions echoed each time. Do I belong? Can I stay? Will you still want me if I'm not easy? The answer was always yes. Years passed. The barn got painted 3 times. The roses by Ruth's marker bloomed without fail each April. The dogwoods grew heavy with blossoms, enough for 3 weddings and countless Sunday dinners beneath their boughs. Sally grew into a writer. Myra took over the horses. Louise married a deputy. June opened a bakery in town that sold biscuits named after each of the girls from the original house. Delilah and Elias grew older slowly. Their hair silvered, their backs bent more than before, but their spirits never did. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the whole field to fire, Elias sat on the porch whittling. Delilah rocked beside him, a shawl around her shoulders, her hands folded over her stomach. "You remember the first thing I ever said to you?" he asked. She grinned. "You told me my mule was blind." He laughed, still the most stubborn creature I ever met. "She got us to the ridge, though, didn't she?" She did. So did we. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets. The hum of children's voices drifted from the kitchen where the newest batch of girls, rescued, restless, and redemptive, were washing up after supper. I was thinking, Elias said, about something Myra said last week, about how she wants to build another barn, bigger, warmer, enough for 30 girls. Delilah raised an eyebrow. 30. Well, she's aiming big, got your fire in her. Delilah smiled. She's got your patience. They both chuckled, then watched the stars begin to blink through the dusk. Elias. Oh? Do you think Ruth sees us? He reached for her hand, calloused and steady. I do. I think she sees every flower blooming, every girl sleeping sound in a bed that isn't locked from the outside, every meal shared without fear. Delilah closed her eyes. Then I hope she knows we never forgot. One morning a little girl arrived. She was maybe 7, thin as a twig, hair in tangles, a scar across her brow and a silence too old for her age. She didn't say her name. She just sat by the fence, clutching a cracked wooden doll with one missing eye. Delilah brought her a plate, no questions, just food. Later she brought a blanket, then a storybook, then a brush. Eventually the girl spoke. My name's Clara. Delilah smiled. Clara, that's a strong name. The girl whispered, they said I was too ugly to sell. Delilah didn't flinch, just knelt beside her. Well then, she said, they must have been blind, because I see a girl brave enough to survive, and that makes her beautiful. Clara burst into tears. Delilah held her through it. Later that night, Elias came in and found his wife still awake. She all right? He asked. She will be, Delilah said. They always are, once they know someone's not gonna leave. Elias kissed her forehead. Then we'll stay. And they did. The story of Delilah Wren, the girl left behind, the girl called ugly, the girl who was told she'd never be loved, became legend in Briar Gulch. Not because of pity, not because of tragedy, but because of triumph. She didn't just survive. She built a place where others could too. A place where ugly meant strong, and broken meant healing, and love meant staying, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. And somewhere out in the field, as the wind danced through the tall grass, and the barn door creaked open with laughter, Ruth's rosebush bloomed again. One more season. One more chance. For love to win.